So, today's video, I'm going to be talking about my personal thoughts about the movie Furiosa. It's a movie that came out earlier this year, and I do admit that I did go and watch it three times. It's pretty rare for me to go and watch a movie in theater three times. Now, luckily, the one of the times I think was the second time I paid like maybe $10, $5, $10, something like that for the movie. But either way, right? So I went and saw the movie 3 times. I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I thought it was really great. Now, a lot of people call this movie, "Oh, it's a flop, it bombed." And that's one of the things I will go into greater details later on in the video. But I it's always weird when you see a movie that cost millions of dollars to make and made millions of dollars be described as a flop. But like I said, later on in the video, I will talk about it a little bit more in depth and really get into it. So for now, I'm just going to give you guys a very brief description of the movie and what's going on. So for now, there's no major spoilers, but I probably will have spoilers later on in the video. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want any spoilers or anything, please, by all means, stop the video now, go watch the movie, and come back to it. If you don't mind spoilers or you're going to see the movie anyways, then please stay with me. Obviously, the movie is no longer in theaters, so you do have to either buy it online or rent it, whatever works. So basically, this movie is a prequel to the Mad Max saga, okay? Where you're really looking at the history of a particular character that figures in one of the sequels, Fury Road. And it's obviously a history of Furiosa, the title character in the movie. You're seeing that she comes from a place that they call a place of abundance, because the movie is taking place in a post-apocalyptic Australia, which is a really novel and fantastic idea. I think they really did that idea very well. And there's only very few places in Australia that actually have greenery where you can grow food and depend quote unquote on nature and so forth. But of course, there's people from the Badlands that have found that place and end up kidnapping Furiosa. Of course, her mother and other people in the village in the green place go after her and try to capture her or get her back, but unfortunately are not successful. And Furiosa's mother unfortunately passes away, and she does not in this movie return to the green place. So unfortunately, you see that Furiosa grows up with her kidnappers, particularly a character that's called Dr. Dementis, who's played by Chris Hemsworth. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the characters and who they played right here, right now, but I will get into that later. But yeah, you see her grow up and all of her experiences, and you see that, of course, grown up in the Badlands of Australia, that this marks her in a very traumatizing way. She does a lot of things to try to escape and get back to the Greenlands, get back to her own world, and is unfortunately unsuccessful, because obviously, like I said, this is a prequel to another movie. You see that in that other movie, she does quote unquote find the green spot, but unfortunately, it no longer is there. So, obviously, I will talk about my own personal opinions about the movie shortly. This was just a very quick summary of the movie. Now, I have to say, now obviously my summary was very brief by intention, but I have to say that I really enjoyed the movie. I found it really great. Now, a lot of people, oh, it's a woke movie. It's those gosh darn liberals trying to. I honestly, and that's my personal suggestion. When you go into a movie blind. Don't read the reviews. Don't read oh, it's a redneck movie. It's a conservative movie. It's a woke movie. It's a whatever it is, right? Go into the movie because you find it interesting, right? Because honestly, I did not feel like this was one of those movies that was made to pander to the liberal left and to, oh, it's full of wokeness and oh my god. I honestly looked at it as a really great a mix of horror and action movies. Now, it's not obviously a strict horror movie in the same sense of, a lot of the other horror movies that came out this year, like The Pool or something like that. Um, but it really had a lot of those horror and action elements where you really felt that the main character Furiosa was going through something very traumatic, very horrible, very like she was literally taken out of a world that already wasn't a great fantastic world. Again, this is a post apocalyptic world. So she's in a world already from the get go. She's not living in, yes, this is supposed to be sometime around, 2020, 2020, like around our time, but it's not like, she's meant to be in, 2152, like Star Trek world, right? It's supposed to be speaking about modern day and the what if there was a nuclear war, what if, what would happen if we went through World War III and went through all that trauma, right? So it's really meant to speak about ourselves, right? Now, it's no accident that I named this video Furiosa a love story, which sounds very like, wait, what? Furiosa? Wait, what? What do you mean? What do you mean love story? Um, but it's a love story at many different levels as well. In the movie, you'll notice that Furiosa does at least seems to fall in love with one of the other characters. And no, it's not Dr. Dementis himself, but gives her that, at the very least, first attempt to really want to, as a teenager, young adult, to want to go back to the green place and really find her home, her place. And she's one of the characters that truly does, yeah, she does evil, she does unalive people, she does do bad things but with good intent. She doesn't do it for the sake of doing it, or unlike Dr. Dementis, who he's truly doing all this evil for his own personal gain, his own personal, hey, my life is screwed, so I'm gonna do bad to you because other people did bad to me. But with Furiosa, and you do have that later on near the end of the movie, they one of the characters calls her the darkest of angels, right? Where you get the sense that Furiosa does things out of, I want to unalive the people that are preventing the good from actually being around, right? So you see that she wants to build a world that's better, not just for herself, but for other people. She sees that this is the time, right? Where we can do good right here, right now. But yes, that will mean doing bad things. That will mean unaliving people that need to not be here. Dr. Dementis is one of them. There are other characters, of course, that I'm not going to talk about here because they're not really in the movie. Yes, they're part of the movie, but they're part of other movies, right? So you get this angelic purpose with Furiosa. So, of course, now I'm going to go a little bit more into some of the characters that you're going to see in the movie and talk a little bit more in detail about the movie itself. Of course, this movie is a prequel, like I said before, about Furiosa, a character that you will see in a separate movie later on. It is part of the Mad Max series. There's like four or five different movies before this that came out before this, I should say. There's also a video game, and of course there's several comic books in the Mad Max universe. Okay, so you're really building a world just like Marvel or the DC universe, etc. You're building a world where you'll have the original Mad Max, where it's talking about the world in general, and then you'll have movies like this one where you're talking about a specific character. Okay, so this movie, you're following the main character, which is, of course, the protagonist, Furiosa, and then the two main antagonists. In this movie, you're talking about Dr. Dementis. This was one of the two antagonists. He does end up not living at the end of the movie. And then Immortan Joe is the other antagonist, who's the big bad in several of the other, comic books and other movies in this world. He's the ultimate big bad that you're going to see and follow. Now, I'm not going to go through a whole big history of all the characters and the comic books and the other movies, etc. There are probably, hundreds, if not thousands, of videos on YouTube where, if you really want to get more information about these characters, you probably have your choice of videos that you can go and watch and really get an in-depth exploration of any of the things that I talk about, whether it's a specific character or theme or etc. I'm just here to give you guys my personal opinion about the movie. And of course, there are other characters. Now, part of why I had said that, this is a love story is Furiosa. You get the impression it's not stated obviously, but just by how she interacts, you get the impression that one of the characters that's sort of idealized in the movie by the name of Praetorian Jack, that they kind of fall in love or develop, at the very least, a deeper bond for each other. And I think with this character, you get the sense that he was teaching her to give, at the very minimum, the beginning of their relationship, that he just wanted to give, he probably saw something in her that he wanted to give her the tools, the means to get to succeed at what she was going for, right? You got the sense that he saw in her something that was different from most of the other people, right? Because what you have to understand is that the character of Immortan Joe, he's the leader of, the big bad, right? And Immortan Joe is accustomed that most, uh, if not all, people are there obediently obeying him and really follow his instructions to the letter of the law, right? So anybody that rebels against him, it's an affront to him personally, right? Most of the people there are obedient to Immortan Joe, right? Now some of the side characters that do play an important role in the life of Furiosa is Scrotus and Rectus, the sons of Immortan Joe. Now, what's important to understand in the movie of Furiosa is you get a general timeline that the apocalyptic world that they're living in, even though it's set to mid 1900s to about now mid 20th century, right? That your 21st century, I should say. Um, that you're dealing with a an event that happened about 30-40 years ago, right? The initial nuclear bomb probably happened quite some time ago, at least enough where it wasn't something that was in the memory, if like you were born 20 years ago, you didn't live through the event. But if you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, you probably saw the event or heard of it, right? And you have at least some memory of the apocalyptic event. Now, there's no in this movie, at the very least, there's no details as to what that event was. You get these snippets at the beginning of the movie that something happened, right? Something really bad happened, but you're not getting any information, right? But because everybody knows and accepts that it was a nuclear bomb that went off, that of course is going to have an impact on the life and health of people that were already born and who are being born in this world. So they talk a lot about people who have half lives, right? So people that are obviously affected by the nuclear wasteland, which is why if you were a woman like Furiosa, if you're able to give birth already, that puts you in a very distinct group. And if you can give birth to quote unquote healthy babies, you're extra special, right? And in fact, with Immortan Joe, what allows him, or at least part of the reason that allows him to be in power, and what he so fiercely protects, is the fact that he has quote unquote many wives that are in the movie. You'll see that he has many wives that are pregnant, and one in fact gives birth. Your ability to give birth and give birth to healthy babies as a woman will give you a special status, right? And the woman who gives birth, unfortunately, does not give birth to a healthy baby. So she's, you know, quote unquote, kicked out of the inner circle. She is still used and abused, for lack of a better word. She's then afterwards made to produce basically what's called in the movie mother's milk. So her breast milk is meant to be, I apologize for that if it sounds very crude, right? She's meant to, her breast milk is meant to be a source of nutrient, of food for the people, right? So even though this is, of course, by our standards, people are like, wait a minute, this is not normal, this is not right. In their world, right? Any source of food is a good source of food. So yes, you see aquaponics, you see greenery, you see them using the tops of mountains to provide food for people. They're not ashamed of saying, yeah, you know what, if breast milk is good enough for babies, it's good enough for us as well, right? So they're really not wasting sources of nutrient of food. You'll see them in this movie talk a lot about as well, basically turning insects into food as well, right? So any source of protein, nutrients, food is a good source. So you're really, this is the kind of world where, they're really focused on making sure that everybody has at least a chance of surviving, or at the very least, the elites in the world have a chance of surviving, right? Immortan Joe is talking about, not getting addicted to water, right? Because, of course, water in a post apocalyptic world is also very important, right? If you don't have water, you're not going very far in life, right? So you're really in this world defending food and food sources of all kinds, right? The other source of battle of problems between, especially Dr. Dementis and Immortan Joe, is oil, right? Because as they call it gasoline, right? Instead of gasoline, because you'll see here, there's kind of, obviously there's going to be a certain amount of distinction with Australian English versus, American, Canadian, or British English. but also that because you're dealing with an isolated world like Australia, that they're going to have a distinct way of talking. Um, but basically, certain resources are highly fought over, right? One of them is gasoline, is because obviously in this movie you'll see a lot of the characters are on motorcycles or in cars, which of course take gas, right? So, one of the important city states essentially is Gas Town, right? Because they make it very clear that, hey, the second we no longer have gas, we no longer have a means of transportation that's quick and easy, right? Because even though in the green spot, in the green place, I should say, they have horses without greenery, without grass, they're gonna die, right? And oftentimes, any animal that is around is going to also be a source of food. Any mode of transportation that does not depend on an animal is highly praised, right? So, of course, like I said, they're dependent very much on gas in order to power their cars, in order to power their motorcycles. So, gas town being a source, it's basically, I don't know if this is the right term, but they are have access to an oil rig, a land oil rig. um, it becomes all of a sudden very important to protect this oil rig, this source of oil, because if you don't have food, if you don't have gas, how are you crossing the mostly desert place of Australia, especially after a nuclear attack, right? So there's a certain amount of things that you're going to see the characters is like, we can't go without this. We have to do everything we can to protect this. And of course, that's the big motivation of Dr. Dementis in the movie. Is his main goal is to gain power through taking over either Gastown or the Citadel, which he discovers through one of the characters that you see him, side characters where he discovers and says, "Hey, is this Valhalla?" Right? Because that's the thing with Immortan Joe, is that he'll have a cult. He built a cult to follow him. 'Cause that's part of how he gains control, right? Is, hey, your route to heaven, your route to a better life is through me. And of course, Dementis has that same mentality, right? But applies it differently, right? But with Dr. Dementis, he's like, look, I'm going to feed you the common people. I'm going to give you everything that you need. And he sees with Gastown, with the Citadel, that, hey, if I take over one or both of these worlds, I can provide you, the common folk, access to food, access to gas, access to the resources that we need, right? You're gonna get a better life through me. So that's why with both Dr. Dementis and Immortan Joe, they become almost these Jesus-like savior characters and become antagonistic with each other, because they both have the same goal, i.e., we're here to save the people, but they do it in very different means and in ways that, by today's standards, if anybody were to actually behave like the way Dementis or Emoton Joe would do, we would look at them like, wait a minute, this is not right, right? Emoton Joe is more of a cult leader, sort of like the Jim Jones type of person that, you know, has all this symbology, all these hidden meaning, all these, hey, I'm allowed to have several wives, I'm allowed to have multiple children with multiple men, but the common folk, God forbid, no, no, no. Like, you're fighting for even just water, you're fighting for just even a little bit of food, right? And you have Dr. Dementis that comes in as sort of this rebellious Jesus that's like, I'm here to fight against the statu quo in order to help the common man. But He's a very twisted Jesus where he's not, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for you. He expects everybody else to sacrifice themselves for him in order for him to get the glory and to get that praise, right? And of course, Furiosa fights essentially against both of them because she realizes that neither one of them are really the solution that will ultimately help mankind or humankind, however you want to say it, right? To get back to a better place, right? And I think that's what I like about the character of Furiosa. She's not out here to save the world, right? She's not out here to, oh my God, I'm the next Jesus. She's just out here. I just want to get back to the green place. I just want to get back to that sense of innocence, that sense of everybody has access to food, to water, to, clean living, clean distant living. And even though in this movie she may not realize it, but she can potentially give the tools to the common person to get to that point. Now, in the following movies, you do see, now in this movie, she does defeat Dr. Dementis. In the following movies, she does defeat as well Immortan Joe. So, although in none of the movies you see her reestablishing a green place or taking power, you don't really know if she's going to be any better than Dr. Dementis or Immortan Joe, right? And that's kind of where I want to see the next movies of what will be her, her interpretation of power, her establishment of the new world. So, what else I liked about the movie Furiosa was the action. It was really nonstop action, almost from the get go. I mean, yes, there were, of course, more tranquil, more lull moments. Um, but when you had the spikes of action of go go go, you're looking, you want more, right? And you're not leaving the movie dissatisfied that you weren't getting enough action, right? Um, Now, some people were noting that the CGI was a bit much, especially in the action parts of it. I didn't notice, but maybe it's just me. But yes, of course, this kind of movie, yes, there's going to be quite a bit of CGI. Um, I think there's a moment where one of the individuals gets uh unalived by a pew pew going to the head, right? And of course we know that what happens when a pew pew goes to the head, right? Of course that that does use CGI effect because obviously they're not gonna unalive a real person, obviously, right? So but I didn't notice it as, oh my God, this is janky, this is weird. To me it felt very flawless, very normal, very like, okay, this is what's actually happening like in real life, right? um and I really liked also yes, they used the day for night technique where you're shooting the movie during the day, but in such a way it looks, or it's trying to look like it's the night, but like right away that, okay, it doesn't look right. It doesn't look like this is the natural nighttime feeling, right? But I think for a movie like this where they're trying to portray Australia in dystopian times, right? I think that really works. Okay. Now, obviously, the other thing that I like about this movie is the different themes, right? The roles of women and men in this kind of society, right? What does it mean to be a woman in this kind of society? What does it mean to be a man, right? I also like the fact that, like, how do you deal with surviving in this kind of world. Now, I know before, I said that, this movie, a lot of people criticized it for being woke, and I just said, oh, the roles of men and women. But it's always in this in this movie, I felt it was more, is this all what we're meant to be, or should we or not, so yes, there was a bit of questioning of the rules, but it didn't feel like that was the primary motive of it, right? Where the few women that you see are there just as much fighting for their lives as the men were. They weren't, waiting for the men to save them in this part of the movie. Yes, of course, in the follow up, you have a little bit more of that, right? But here it's really much more of, I'm just as much in a position where I have to survive regardless of my gender than everybody else, right? I have to do just as much work, put my life at just as much of a risk as the men do, right? So, overall, this is some of the things that I liked about the movie. I really thought that it was enjoyable. Now, as far as it being a flop per se, um and that's really where, like, it's always weird to me, and it's often because of the marketing budget, right? When we say, oh, the movie costs $5 million to make, or 10 million, or 100,000, or whatever, it never includes, or usually doesn't include, the marketing budget, right? So a lot of the times, right, everything else that it comes to make a movie, right? So the cost of paying the actors, the cost of production, the cost of distribution, of putting the film as a film, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so that it's actually out there in the movie theaters, et cetera, et cetera. If they say all of that costs $1 million, they're not telling you about the marketing, i.e., the publicity, right? So I don't know the exact figures for this movie. I think it's in the few millions, or I think something like 10, 15 millions. You're going to add X amount for the marketing. So when you don't count the marketing, they actually made a profit, right? But I think even with the marketing, they might have just made a profit, or not quite. And it's always weird to me, like, like, how is it that you can spend millions of dollars on marketing when, like, to me, that doesn't make that much sense. But I don't think, I don't consider a movie a flop when it doesn't make profit. When you're making several millions of dollars, to me, it's like, that means a whole bunch of people saw it. To me, if you're telling me the movie, even when it's counting the marketing, let's say it would have cost $20 million to make this movie, everything can, uh, counted, and you're telling me they made 15 million. Yes, they're not making a profit, but it's not a flop, right? They're not profitable, okay, but they're not a flop because, like, how, even at the higher price of the VIB tickets, you still have to sell a lot of tickets, right? A lot of people have to be buying the tickets in order to go see this movie, right? So if it was costing the company 20 million and they only sold $100,000 of tickets, then yes, that's definitely a flop, right? You're definitely only selling extremely little. I think the FIFA movie was, or one of the FIFA, like a FIFA movie, I can't remember which one it is, um, did something like that where they made a few $1,000s and it cost them a few million or a few $100,000 at the very least, right? They made extremely little back on their money, right? That, yes, of course, it's an extreme flop, right? To me, a flop is basically when you're not even making 60% of your money back. It's a flop. Between 60 and 80, is it a flop? Is it not a flop? Okay, it's debatable, right? But when you're making at least 80% of your money back, okay, is it a profitable movie? No, but it's not a flop, right? And of course, if you're making a profit, everything considered, then yeah, it's probably a hit, and they're most likely. And I have a funny feeling that they probably will make more Mad Max movies. Now, will they continue with the big names and to continue doing with making it the movie the way they're doing, maybe not, right? They might try something different. They might try a different director. Maybe they might try to rein in the CGI. They might try to, okay, let's reduce the cost of this movie, right? But I think they've made enough money to justify making another. I don't know if they're going to make another prequel or another sequel to it. Who knows, right? Maybe they might decide to just revamp the whole thing. Who knows, right? But I think they probably will make another movie, right? I think it had enough attention for them to want to continue making Mad Max. And to be honest, I think it's worth it, right? Um, Now, I do admit that I didn't watch all of the other Mad Max movies. I didn't play the video game. I didn't read the book, or I should say the comic book, right? Or graphic novels for those who want to be more accurate, right? But I think it's that kind of series of movies that is worth continuing, even if it doesn't always make a profit every single time, right? We see that a lot in a lot of movies, right? Where you'll have 5, 6, 7, 20 movies in the series, but some movies you might only see one or two, or there's only one or two that make it big, right? Think of the Leprechaun movies for those of you who are old school like me, right? You might have seen the first, maybe the second one, but I think there's like 5 or 6 Leprechaun movies, right? And when I tell people, yeah, there's like actually a lot of them, there's like 6 or 7. People are like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah. Now, of course, with the Leprechaun movies, it's extremely low budget, and most of them go, for those again who are low, like old school like me, went straight to DVD. Most of the movies, right? Um, they may want to do something relatively similar where it goes straight to streaming, or maybe they might want to do a TV show or something like that, right? But I think they will make other Mad Max movies, right? Um, I'm not sure how they would go about. I think for me, the Furiosa part of it is done. I don't see how you would really need to continue having her as being like the central part of it. But I definitely think that they will continue. Maybe they might go with having a movie about Dr. Dementis. And I think that's the other thing that I liked about this movie. I was very pleasantly surprised with Chris Hemsworth as Dr. Dementis. And yes, he is wearing quite a lot of prosthetic. You really, like, it's him, but like it's off-putting how it doesn't really look like him at all. It's There's enough of a difference between how Chris Hemsworth normally looks versus how he looks in this movie. Um, and of course, you have a Furiosa, who's played by Anya Taylor Joy, who, of course, now is a very well known actress. She's in a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, etc. So yeah, I think I remember seeing her in The Witch. That's, I think, the first movie I saw her in, but I know she's been in a lot of other movies and TV shows, especially in England, etc. So, and then you had Praetorian Jack, who was played by Tom Burke. And then you had the other characters. Let me just look at the Wikipedia for the movie so that I get the full list of characters, and hopefully it tells me who played who. Okay, it doesn't. Um, but obviously, there are other actors involved in the movie. I know that Furiosa later on gets played by Charlize Theron. That's important to note. Um, Let me see if I can find. Uh, So yeah, the other characters are played in the characters that are played by. There's Immortan Joe, that's played by Lahi Holm. Rictus Erectus is, of course. and Scrotus, the brothers of and sons of Morton Joe. Those two names always get me. Uh, Rictus Erectus is played by Nathan Jones, and Scrotus is played by Joss Hellman. And other notable characters that do feature in a couple of the other movies is the People Eater, played by John Howard, and the Organic Mechanic is played by Angus Sampson. So it was really nice to see. I think it was a really well-rounded cast where, especially with Chris Hemsworth, of course, everybody knows Chris from the Thor and Marvel movies. And I mean, I've seen him in other things as well. Of course, the all-female version of Ghostbusters and a couple other movies as well. I really like seeing him outside of Thor, and of course, in this movie, he's playing one of the antagonists, and he did it very well. I felt like he was ultimately the star of the movie. Everybody's going in there. I think more for Anya Taylor Joy, but I think I personally left really liking, you know, Chris Hemsworth character and his portrayal of the character, right? I really felt like, oh my god, he really was playing the character in a really scary way. Like you really felt like the character was that kind of crazy that, oh my god, you're like, you feel threatened by this guy. Like you're not, it's not that kind of crazy where it's like fun crazy like Nicolas Cage, right? Nicolas Cage has that energy of, okay, you don't know what he's gonna do, but you don't feel threatened by him. While as Chris Hemsworth as Dr. Dementis, you get that sense of craziness, but it's the danger crazy, right? You don't know when he's going to potentially go against you or use you as a human shield or whatever, right? So it's that kind of crazy that has you on edge and has you worried about your own safety, right? um so it's really that kind of movie where I think you get to see him in a different way, in a different light. And I think it was really nice to see him in that kind of situation, right? And I do like the fact, I think they used the fact that in this movie you can still see that he has his quote unquote Thor body, but it wasn't like in Thor, you could tell that he was working out and they were really emphasizing, of course, except for one, I think it was End Games, right? Where he had the big belly and all that. But I think for most of them, like they wanted to make, oh, he's a god and he's like, oh, supposed to be imposing and muscly and all that. But in this movie, you get the impression that this is a guy that was probably born before the nuclear war happened, or just like as it started, so his quote unquote muscles and all that were not, okay, I'm spending hours at the gym. It's more, I'm living a difficult life where people have to do things physically themselves every day, right? So you have muscles because every day you're lifting up cars, you're pushing things, you're like, everybody's in physical labor, right? Nobody's really living a lap of luxury, right? So there's very few people that are fat or overweight because they're, oh my god, the luxury life, right? Like everybody is skinny or muscly, or because like even if you're fed, it's like you're physically doing everything, right? You're not, you don't have time to be a couch potato. You're not spending several hours at a desk job or something, right? So it's like it's one of the other, right? Either you have quote unquote working muscles or you're skinny because you're starving, right? And you get that sense with Chris Hemsworth character, right, where he has some muscles, but you don't get the sense that he has these muscles because he's spending hours a day at the gym several days a week, right? You get the sense that he has these muscles because he's using his body every day, right? He's fighting, he's, has clan wars all the time. So you can't afford to not be fit, right? You can't afford to not have at least some muscles to you, right? Now, there are a couple characters that are overweight, but you get this sense that that's not the norm, right? This is not everybody is overweight and having, living a life of luxury here, right? It's not the where you see in America or Canada or the UK nowadays, where what 30-40% of the population is obese, right? It's you get the impression that maybe 5%, 10% of the population might be obese, maybe, but you're it's not the norm, right? That's not the standard, right? So overall, this is my opinion about the movie. I really liked it. I think for those of you who are at least curious, you might enjoy seeing it on. I don't know if it's on Netflix, but I've seen it. I know it's the Cineplex here in Canada has it on their platform to buy. I think it's also available on YouTube for those of you who want to buy it or rent it on YouTube. I think where else did I see? I think I seen it on other couple other platforms for those who want to. But if you're curious, you can Google it and it'll show you what platforms have the movie available for rent or purchase, which is still watch online through some kind of streaming services. I think it's worth it. I hope that you do get a chance that if they re-show it in the big screen at some point, do take the opportunity to go see it in the screen if ever. Like I said, it does go back into theaters for some reason, somehow, right? I think it's worth it. So I hope you guys liked my review. Give me a like, a share, comment, or even if you're just viewing this video, thank you very much. I much appreciate it, and let me know what your thoughts are. Have a great day, guys.